Okay, so I wanted to do a video on this. It's interesting to me, and I just thought it, I like content by, You're Kidding Me. I am a subscriber of her channel, as you can see right here. I am a subscriber. So I just wanted to really just talk about some of the things she was mentioning here from a different perspective. I do have a different perspective than You're Kidding Me, right? And Vanessa Vokey, and I'm a supporter, I guess you could say a subscriber of, both channels. So, this is my first video reviewing of You're Kidding Me, right? But yeah, here we go.
Right? What are we looking at? We are looking at that Times UK article that discusses that to pay doctors £178 per patient per year to prescribe wrong-sex hormones. Yes, indeed, that is a thing. I will post a link to this article in the description for the video so that you can check that out for yourself. But £178 per patient per year if a general practitioner prescribes wrong-sex hormones. Spectacular, isn't it? Now, it's described as a scheme, which it is, but I prefer the word scam, because what it's doing is scamming the gender confused and the perverse, specifically the HPs, who are drowning in their sexual fantasy of themselves as women. It's a scam to separate them from their health and to separate the British public from their money. Nice, right? You gotta kill two birds with one stone. You might as well, right? So, what's the problem? Well, the problem is this. Consider that a lot of people who will get filtered into this program are mentally ill. Remember that at this point, the number of women seeking to transition has skyrocketed. So a lot of these people will be young women who will be put on testosterone, which will atrophy their uteri and their ovaries, necessitating hysterectomy and oophorectomy, which puts that young woman on the fast track to dementia. Not to mention the increased risk of cardiovascular problems like hypertension, stroke, deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolism. Forget about all that. So what this is encouraging GPs to do, essentially, is to, to clog up their practice with...
To me, I think that, I don't know about the NHS, but when you present any kind of gender differentiation to general practitioners, their first answer is a hormone. And that's what I think is kind of like weird to me, because why is it that people focus on trying to change someone's body to solve a problem? Maybe the problem isn't their body. Maybe it's actually society, And I feel like often with these situations, if you go, there's two things about general practitioners. They either do one or the other. They either push hormones in your face, or they get really uncomfortable and don't really want to talk about the issue. Now, it could be on different levels. One, some people have so many connotations against transgender people that even in the sense of, if you're not trans, say you are someone who just found out you have an intersex condition, for example, they're going to put you in the same category of just throwing hormones at you. basically. They're still going to just basically either throw hormones or try to suppress. They never try to deal with the dang situation. They never do. It doesn't matter if it's a physical condition. It doesn't matter if it's someone who's trans. It just doesn't matter. They're lazy, basically. They're lazy about the situation. They don't want to actually address the problem. They don't want to address the situation that a person is finding themselves in when they have the binary of the gender roles that aren't even really tangible, because it's all about behaviors and things of that nature, which box women and men in boxes specific to basically behavior, and personality, which can't be determined by what sex you are, because people behave very differently, and people, when they have people who don't fit those boxes, they don't want to actually deal with the problems. They want to deal with trying to make them basically so-called conform. So they either want to squash it and say, ignore it, you're just the same as everyone else, or they want to say, oh, okay, take some hormones so you can be like a man, or you could be like a woman, and you can fit in with society, and you can trick society into thinking you're a woman. You know what I mean? Continue.
These individuals, right? Because you're going to put them on medications that will harm them and cause adverse medical consequences. You'll take, let's assume, healthy people, put them on drugs that will undermine their health, and then they will require more medical care. Just off the top of my head, this seems like something that will seriously undermine the ability of the National Health Service to function. Because, like I said, you're going to put large numbers of people on drugs that harm them, and they're going to need medical care, as opposed to people who are not on drugs that will harm them, who need medical care for conditions that they did not induce in themselves. But, trans.
You have to understand, these people don't give a darn about the health of these people. They just care about making things fit. That's what they care about. That's why they push people to either transition or to basically suppress. It's one or the other. And you can see that this is how the medical community was way before transgender people, because you could see this with intersex people, how they treated them and things of that nature. And to me, it's important to notice this, because you can see that what they would do in those situations is suppress or try to change to fit, basically. If they can't ignore it, they try to change it to fit one of the sexes. The problem is with the medical community is that they are stuck in a binary. So they've gone so extreme that they're at the point where they're trying to change male sex and female sex individuals into being visibly the other sex, basically. When everyone is admitting that no one can be another sex. Even those who feel suicidal by admitting they are the male sex when they want to be the female sex, understand they will never be the female sex. You know what I mean? But it's like a lot of the time, I think it was made by the medical community, who basically has this idea that if things aren't fitting in one way or another, whether that's emotionally or physically, they want to make that person fit the binary, basically. And the binary has been destroying plenty of people's lives, people who think they're one sex or think they're one gender or whatever, or they believe in that whole stuff and they think that their sex is somehow wrong or something. They basically have this idea where they want to continuously impress upon people that they have to transition, because in many cases with these type of people, many of the people may not have even wanted to transition themselves, but their therapists and their general practitioners will actually tell them that they need to transition because of the things that they feel. So even if that person was to say they didn't want to transition, there are the medical professionals who will try to push them in that direction. They'll act like the only way they can fix it is by giving them hormones. So, yeah, to me, it's just, I think it goes back to how the medical profession has always tried to push people into certain categories. Continue.
It also creates a favored class, right? Because now people who are gender confused, who are drowning in sexual fetish, can go to their GP, not their internist, not their endocrinologist, but to their GP and say they want these drugs, and now the GP is incentivized to go along with this person's sexual fetish or to reinforce this individual's mental illness by prescribing these harmful drugs to them. So, there you go. If you are trans, you don't need to go to a doctor. The doctor's not a doctor anymore. The doctor's a medical concierge who must do what you ask them to do, or who is highly incentivized to do what you ask them to do, regardless of the doctor's judgment. Good going, NHS. Okay, let's take a look at this article. Zara Aziz, a Bristol GP, said that she was concerned that the scheme would...
But I honestly think, besides the incentive, that many general practitioners and so forth many of the time they are encouraged to push people to transition in the first place. That's sometimes the bias that they naturally have, So, I'm just saying that I understand you're saying that they are incentivized now even more, but I think beforehand they were also incentivized to kind of push people to transition in many cases. So, continue.
Add to doctors' workload with capacity already strained. Right, COVID is still going on. And then there are people who need to go to the doctor for non-COVID reasons. But, trans, listen, you gotta get these people on the wrong sex hormones. You don't want to miss out on all that money. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about a site that I found that's basically do-it-yourself hormone dosage. It's really quite something. So why send all that money to China or Poland? Because apparently Poland supplies wrong sex hormones. Why send it out? Listen, you keep that money in the UK where it belongs. That's the way to do it. Don't make it so they've got to go on the internet or on the black market or whatever you call it to buy their hormones. Give the hormones to the GPs and put the money in the GP's pockets. Come on. Money. Money, money, money. Money, money, money. It is all about money. All right, let's keep going. She said, it feels like this is being handed over to GPs with a training package and off you go. Yes, that is exactly what is happening. On the following page, they discuss the rigorous, extremely demanding 2.5-hour online training program that GPs must undergo in order to be eligible for this program. Yes, 2.5 hours. Not 2.5 hours per day, not 2.5 hours per week, 2.5 hours.
Wow.
That's quality. Let's keep going. Professor Martin Marshall, chairman of the Royal College of GPs, said that family doctors had an important role in delivering care to trans patients. Right. Into delivering drugs to trans patients. See? Drugs. They can deliver the drugs to them. That is very important. Because if you've checked out Reddit forums, you know that it is very important to the lady dick bearers, that they get to take their titty skittles, yes they do indeed call them that, or they get to take their bimbo pills, or their lady drugs. And it's very important to the young women who seek to impersonate men that they take their testosterone so they can grow a T-dick, or a beard, or both, or neither.
They can't grow a penis. That's one thing that's kind of like annoying with transitioning female to male. They can't grow a penis, and sometimes many of the phalloplasty surgery is seemingly a struggle, you know. And if you have bottom dysphoria, yeah, it's really it's a thing that makes a lot of people discouraged. Some people struggle with. Some people I've even heard have situations where they got phalloplasty and then it got removed. And some individuals, I think somebody actually had a complication with that whole situation. And it's an infamous situation in Belgium, I think. A Belgian trans man decided to end his life because of the phalloplasty failure and something that happened in that situation. It kind of shows, you know, people can go through the whole transition of female to male transitioning, and they can still end up very dissatisfied and end up, you know, ending their lives. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that in there. Continue.
Because obviously no amount of testosterone is going to turn a clitoris into a penis. It may cause a woman to grow a beard, but then she looks like a woman with a beard. So there's that.
Exactly. It's not really... I feel like, honestly, I've seen a lot of trans men, and oftentimes I would think they look more feminine than I do. Being completely honest. Because they would have, like, for example, you turn around and then their, like, body type is, like, still hourglass, for example. You know, they have, like, a voice type that kind of, like, sounds like a squiggly pig, kind of. And on top of it, you know, the face shape. They don't have a change in their face shape to me. Their face shape to me looks still very round and feminine. So to me, it just looks like they have a beard, you know, and they might have a voice that I guess you could perceive as male, but it's very like piggish, like very squeaky, so to speak. It's not completely a male voice, really. You can hear the female voice out of the male voice kind of situation. It's almost like with trans men, they really don't have the things that really make them seem like they're really at all similar to the male sex. I think people, maybe the technology's a little lazier for them. I don't know, really. But to me, they look even less male than the trans women look female. And the trans women, to me, honestly, they look male. This is why I've always said with trans women, I'm personally, okay, a lot of the time people do not like me saying this, but, you know, when I look at trans women, I think that they look physically like males in the sense of interests. To me, I'm attracted to trans women as much as I am to men. You know, that's just what it is, you know. And I know a lot of people don't like, you know, a female-born woman being attracted to trans women while being attracted to men, but not being attracted to women. Because so many times people like to try and say, I'm bisexual or something of that nature, or pansexual, because I am attracted to trans women, but I'm not attracted to women who are born female. So I'm not attracted to cis women, basically. Um, but my point is that in this situation, with trans men, I just kind of think, they claim that they're easily passable or they are undetectably male. I think they just mean they're more undetectably in the sense of representation, in the sense of like clothing, maybe like behavior or something, because it's not in the phenotype for sure. Because to me, trans men definitely look like women. And, as a person who I've said before, I've considered transitioning to male in the past, and that was a major reason why I didn't want to do it, because it was like it's not even a successful transition to me, in my opinion. And when I would see these trans men, it was discouraging because it was like, well, then if you don't look like a cis man, then you really didn't do anything. You didn't really transition to anything, And it's just kind of was like, it's disheartening sometimes when you're young, when you're a teen, and you're like, oh, it can't happen. And in my case, there's more to my story, and I never really talk about the whole story with my situation. And I probably won't on my channel. I've talked on I don't know if I've talked on You Are Kidding Bright's channel on this. I know I've talked on Vanessa Vokey's channel about it, but anyway, um, my my whole thing is just on trans men and them transitioning and things of that nature. I just don't really think it is all that successful in completing anything. More so in hopes to disguise things. Yes, they do try to do that. Disguising, though, isn't actually being. Disguising is hiding female features. It's not actually being of the male sex. And to me, I think, you know, when you have dysphoria, it's different levels to dysphoria. Sometimes you can see your own dysphoria for what it is. Sometimes you can see your dysphoria um, in a way where, nothing can hide from your dysphoria, really. Some people have that where you can see that as they take the hormones, the dysphoria is still there, and it's not going to make them be able to hide their dysphoria. Now, some people, they take hormones and the dysphoria helps. I mean, it helps them with the dysphoria. It's more hidden because they are able to take the hormones, and I guess the hormones help them because maybe they wanted to grow a beard, I guess, or maybe they didn't want breasts, you know, things of that nature. But when it's a dysphoria where it's specific um, to something that is more pronounced, I guess, and more exact, it's something that you really can't ignore just by growing a beard, really, in my opinion. So continue.
Hold on, I have to enlarge this. Alrighty. Setting out its reason for launching the scheme, Sussex Clinical Commissioning Groups said that research showed the most frequently suggested action for improving health care for trans people was an increase in awareness training within primary care. What? Hold on. So, an increase in awareness training. What does that mean? That is gobbledygook. The most frequently suggested action for improving trans healthcare would be, how about talking to people very frankly and very honestly about the harm they can do to themselves by injecting themselves or ingesting in other ways wrong sex hormones? How about talking to them about stroke, pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, high blood pressure, the destabilization of moods that can happen when you're on wrong sex hormones? How about explaining it to young...
To me, yeah, I think they should be aware of their medical risk, but I think that they need a solution to the problem. More than hiding it, I do think they need a solution to the problem. Why can't they go through some kind of therapy or, something of that nature? And I don't mean so many of the time people want to go into the idea of like religion or like Christians and things of that nature, trying to basically try and make them fit into what they want. I don't really think that's really the solution either. I think, why can't they deal with whatever differences they are finding within their own sex? Why can't they deal with that? Why can't we also be a little bit more accepting towards people with a difference in gender expression rather than sexual, rather than dysphoria? I'm not talking about that, but in gender expression, I kind of think that if they were allowed to just be however they want it to be in their physical, natural body, then they would just have a lot less dysphoria, And the reason I think that is because oftentimes they're not really focused on having physical traits of the male sex, really. More so, it's about passing. More so, it's about what society sees them as. And that might have to do with their behaviors. Because if their behaviors aren't acceptable as the female sex, then they want their behaviors to be acceptable as the male sex. And so therefore they want to be seen as the male sex, so then their behaviors can be acceptable. This is how they say that they want their true self as themselves to be acceptable to society, basically. What they're saying is their inner core, their inner self, they want acceptable. But what I think is this, that society needs to accept them as they are, and we've come a long way, but originally we didn't accept someone like them to have a body of someone who is of the female sex, but have their own personal identity and behavior more in common with the male gender, so to speak. And, in this regard, I think this is a major problem because this is what makes them want to take the hormones, I think. Some people do struggle with dysphoria. I'm not saying that they don't, but I'm saying some of them do okay, basically, and do a lot better on, say, hormones. And when they're on hormones, you should understand their body, their sex, has no traits that are anything in common with the male sex. There's nothing about it that's in common with them. All it is basically a disguise, trying to dress a certain way, trying to wear a beard, trying to hope your voice is low enough, things of that nature, It's basically to just, it's basically just to express that you are more acceptable to society. So that's all I have to say. Continue.
Women, that if you have your uterus and ovaries removed, you are upping your chances for developing dementia and early onset dementia at that quite a bit. How about that? How about telling them also that, you don't need to change your body simply because you don't conform to gender stereotypes? Is any of that in there? Because that would actually improve their health. Or actually, you know what? It might not improve their health, but it certainly wouldn't damage it. But put them on drugs. Because, again, a lot of these people are mentally ill. And I'm sure none of these GPs, well, I don't know, I cannot make that statement. But I wonder how many GPs are going to tell these individuals that this is a sterilization program. Because that's what it is. Wrong sex hormones don't only impede sexual function and sexual pleasure. If you stay on them long enough, they will make you infertile. Is that the goal? Is the goal to sterilize as many mentally ill people as possible?
Well, when it comes to being with people who are female to male, that's actually not going to be an incentive to not transition, because I mean, like, many of the time the idea of pregnancy triggers a lot of people who are female to male. So I mean, like, that would not be really a bad thing for them. Many of them do not wish to have any chance to become pregnant. So, I mean, taking that ability would be good for them in their mind. So, I mean, like, I don't really get why you would bring that up. No. But okay, continue.
I could not say. Let's keep going. A spokeswoman for Sussex Commissions said transgender, non binary, and intersex TNBI people experience significant health inequalities, something we are committed to tackling. Now, it's something that they are committed to increasing because, first of all, this doesn't have anything to do with intersex people. This is specifically aimed at the gender confused and autogynephiles. So at the gender confused.
No, sometimes it would include intersex people too, because sometimes people are diagnosed with intersex conditions later on in life. Sometimes, in some cases, they may even know you're intersex, but they don't want to really include it in anything because basically everything in your biological function is one sex. So if you're male, assigned, I guess you could say, for intersex people, since they're not really born male if they're intersex, obviously. But if they're male assigned, basically every function, like, through puberty and so forth, you've hit every hurdle and you've reached adulthood and you didn't recognize that you were also, in some regard, also of the female sex as well as the male sex. This happens sometimes because it can happen on a chromosomal level that is on a very small level. So when those things happen, they will treat those type of people the same as someone who is trans. Say if a person who is intersex was, like I said, physically in every capacity male, except the fact that, they aren't, because biologically you could do a DNA test, they wouldn't be XY, or they have some other variation in some regard that medically it was never really determined that there was a difference. Or maybe you may have had a slight difference, like say you have, for example, if you're a female and you have missing periods, but you don't have, not like, there's a difference with someone who never goes into never gets a period, and people who have periods but they're struggling. Okay, like, the periods aren't always there. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're different days, different lengths, things of that nature. You're still going to be put in that category at that point. As long as you get your period, they're not going to really see you as someone who is actually intersex, even if you have XY chromosomes. They're still going to see you as someone who is basically an XX female, especially since, because you have your period, you are a woman who is able to get pregnant and things of that nature. The only time someone's not going to be seen as a female and they've completed all the obstacles is I mean obstacles, I said all the characteristics, I guess, of female. I'm thinking of it in different levels. Like, for example, when you have Swyer syndrome, then those people, they're born with female genitalia, but they can't go into puberty. Then you have the people who, for example, have complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, and then they have, they don't have a period, but they can go into female puberty, and their puberty is pretty female, basically. And then there are the people who, for example, are like maybe a mix of XX and XY chromosomes, or there's many different other conditions. And they have the whole 9 yards, basically. Puberty, born female, obviously, have periods, and so forth. The only time someone has ever been kind of considered intersex and basically come across all those characteristics is this is an athlete of long ago. Her name was like Eva. I think her name is Eva. I don't know. It's the W Eva or it's the W Ewa. I'm not really sure. But her name was like Ewa Klobakowska or something of that nature. She took a DNA test prescribed by her competing in the Olympics, and they extricated her from the Olympics because she had a Y chromosome. She had XX and XXY chromosomes. So, I mean, in some regards, sometimes it does, sometimes it can extricate someone from being female, I guess you could say, and they could be considered intersex in that rare occasion. But that's just a very rare occasion. That's the only situation I can think of. In every other situation, usually if you've basically matured as a female, if you've matured as a male, and you are intersex in the whole 9 yards, I'm not saying like someone who matured as a female doesn't have a period. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who are basically, they have periods, they have everything. They can get pregnant. Many cases where the woman gets pregnant before and had children before and then is pregnant a second time, and then they find out because of DNA testing done and they realize that she has a Y chromosome, things of that nature. You know what I mean? And in these cases, usually these women will have XX chromosomes, by the way. They'll just also have a Y chromosome. But there might be some situations where someone's just XY. I haven't done my research on that, so I'm not going to make any assumptions, because when you make assumptions, you look ignorant. But the point is, there are intersex people who basically fully develop in one direction or another direction. And when that happens in the medical facility and things of that nature, if you are an individual who basically biologically developed as a male, so to speak, in quotes, completely, but you are still technically intersex, you could feel like you are female, or you could feel like you aren't male because you're technically intersex, so it kind of makes sense you wouldn't feel like a male because you are technically intersex. The medical community will actually see those people as the same as transgender people and actually treat them quite accordingly. They're not going to really define them differently. In fact, many of the time they don't even want to diagnose people after they've come to full maturity as intersex or with an intersex condition, because they feel like it's, I think, pointless. Because what's the point of doing it when you've developed completely male or completely developed as a female? You know what I mean? But yeah, I know a lot about this, so I like talking about that. But yeah, continue. I love this video, by the way.
And perverts. And my concern is not for the autogynephiles specifically. Because, well, quite frankly, I don't think anyone should ruin their health. I don't think that there should be a government-sanctioned plan to ruin people's health, which this is. But if some pervy...
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be. It really doesn't. I mean, like, you could fix the situation without pushing any hormones on anyone. Of any kind, for that matter. Even if someone is intersex, for that matter, why do you have to always push hormones? I mean, why do we always have to try and focus on changing people's bodies? As if the body is the issue. The body is definitely not the issue. Whatever body you were born with is the right body you were born with, in my opinion.
Man wants to render himself impotent, that I don't care. The issue, though, is that a lot of these men believe that taking wrong sex hormones entitles them to women's spaces, to women's sports, to be in the women's restroom, to be in the women's locker room, to call themselves a woman, to parade their sexual fetish in front of children as a teacher or in some other capacity. That's the problem. And the fact now that the government is paying doctors to encourage this delusion is very disturbing, even if it's not happening in the United States. Because somebody, some wokey-dope politician in the U.S. is looking at this and thinking, that's a good idea. I wonder if we could do it here. Ideas have a way of traveling. So let's look at this sentence one more time. This says, transgender, non-binary, and intersex people experience significant health inequalities, something we are committed to tackling. Right. That would be, if you're talking about people who are deluded enough to believe that they are or should be members of the opposite sex, that would constitute improved mental health care. As far as non-binary, there is no such thing. These are people in search of an identity. And again, mental health care would be the order of the day.
No, I honestly think non-binary, what do you think that someone is if they are intersex, for one? What if a person who's intersex, for example, doesn't identify with either sex, either gender? You really mean to tell me that intersex people need to identify with a specific sex? I think non-binary would be a good space for some people who don't identify with either and weren't made to identify with either. You know, I don't believe that we need to have a binary, because if we have a binary, we're constantly finding the same problem. We're creating our own problem. Honestly, the way I see it is, when we're talking about the transgender people, why do we have to try and put them into a category? Like, on the basis of who they are as a person, and not about the hormones, because I understand, let their bodies be the bodies that their bodies are, naturally. But why would they have to have a gender expression that is in line with other people of their sex? There's biological evidence that not everyone of a specific sex, whether it's male, female, or intersex, are going to basically have the same, they're not all going to have the same idea of people who are of that sex, basically. Like, they're not going to have the same perception of themselves, basically. They're not going to have the same behavior as the rest of their sex, basically. You know what I mean? So, say there's the male sex. The male sex, many of them fall under a category of alignment with the male gender, but many of the people in the male sex won't align with the male gender. And to me, that doesn't change that male sex individual is not male sex. They're still male sex, they just are different from the other male sex individuals who do fall under the male gender. Now, this can also have to do with the whole thing of the biological connection to it, because a lot of the time people have actually shown how people who have prominent ring fingers tend to display more socially expected masculine gender norms, basically, while people with prominent pointer fingers display more feminine, female expected gender roles, basically. And if you paid attention to this, you would understand that actually people of the female sex and people of the male sex, most people who have the male sex and most people who have the female sex have a certain pattern. So most people of the female sex have a prominent pointer finger, which would make sense because most of the people with the female sex display characteristics common with the female gender. And then there are the majority of men have a prominent ring finger. And that implies that more people of the male sex will express characteristics common with the male gender. So that's how you know that the two are in common by kind of coincidence, if you think of it. Kind of a situation of, maybe it's not coincidence. It's more so just a matter of, there is a commonality here. But not everyone does. And this has to do with the environment of the uterus and of the womb. When these people are in vitro, when you are an unborn child, basically, and how you developed, basically. And in many cases, when someone has a prominent ring finger and is of the female sex, many of the time, the environment was most likely, it had mostly testosterone, basically, not really much estrogen, which basically made them develop a brain that is more masculine, therefore more masculine behavior. So that doesn't mean that person is no longer a female sex individual. And what I'm trying to say here is that people are still going to, they're still going to bleed every month, no matter how masculine your brain is, So you have to accept that someone is going to be of the gender norms of the male gender, but that doesn't mean that their body has to conform to the male sex. Their body is still the male sex. Why can't we just acknowledge what they are? They're basically more on the masculine side of things, but they are just female sex. And same thing with men. They're more on the feminine side of things, the female gendered idea of things, but they are still of the male sex. You get what I'm saying? So continue.
Not sterilizing hormones that are going to give them strokes and cause dementia. And as far as intersex people go, this doesn't have anything to do with them. If that is an actual medical condition that requires specialized care, I would imagine. And so roping.
But the thing is with intersex people, why is it that the idea is that they need to be fixed? Because sometimes when people say like specialized care, that's basically a synonym with the idea that they need their bodies fixed. Why do intersex people need to have their bodies fixed? I don't get it. To me, are they any different than someone who is female sex or male sex? How? They were born with a sex too, you know. They were born with a different sex than male sex and female sex individuals. They were born with both sexes. They are intersex, you know what I mean? So I don't understand why the idea is that they need to change in these situations. And, you know, people of the binary fit our binary, so they're all right. But the people who don't fit into it have to find a way to fit into it. No, the binary is stupid. The binary isn't even real. We can't even touch the damn binary because it's gender, and gender is not tangible. Sex is tangible. Gender is not tangible. That's how you know it's not real. You know, and you know that this in those situations it's kind of like a lot of the time these type of people. Who are trans, for example, I think they get caught up in the binary, and that's why they start damaging their bodies because they were put in a binary. You know, just let them be free, and if they were understanding that they can actually accept their body and love who they are from within, it might be a little bit better than trying to fit someone into a binary that they're never going to fit into. They're not going to fit into the ideas of the gender roles. Why try to put them in the gender roles? Let them just be, you know what I mean? But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I approve of them changing their bodies. I don't believe in them changing their bodies. I don't think it's healthy. You know, now they can do whatever they want with their body. It's a free country. But I don't think that that's the thing that we should encourage. I think we should encourage body positivity even with the trans community. You know, a lot of the time with intersex people, a lot of people do not support body positivity with them. And it's like, you know, people need to understand everybody deserves body positivity. Intersex people, trans people, you know, obviously male people, female people, everybody deserves body positivity, you know. So that's how I see that.
People with differences of sexual development into this is inappropriate, to say the least. All right, so let's look at the last page of this real quick. So, you thought I was kidding about the 2.5 hours? No. The scheme will initially run for 3 years across Brighton and Hove, East Sussex and West Sussex. Participating GPs must undertake 2.5 hours of online training. You can do that. You can listen to it while you're cleaning the house. Easy for everybody. Just give them the drugs and don't worry about it.
Like I said, they have a sloppy way of managing that situation. And I think, like I said, medical professionals tend to have sloppy ways of handling situations like this in every regard, whether it's transgender people, whether it's intersex people. You know, they just have a sloppy way of dealing with the situation. They don't really want to deal with the anything outside of the norm because they feel like their part in society is keeping that norm. So anything that goes against that, they will try to find a way to normalize it and to make it blend in with the rest of society, even if it means destroying somebody's body.
Okay. Sasha Misra, an associate director at Stonewall, said, with enough capacity and training, schemes like this can ensure trans people can access the specialist care they need in their local community without the lengthy wait. So, yes, because in that wait, some people decide that this is not for me. I'm not going to do this. Either they grow out of it, their gender dysphoria dissipates or lessens.
Yeah, a lot of people who are who display as children dysphoria, many of the time they do, but they actually become supposedly like gay men and lesbian women or something like that, you know, which I just find interesting, you know, because people always try and push that trans children should have like a whole transition point and be fully transitioned by 12 or something. You know, they have such crazy ideas of trying to get kids to transition to the opposite sex off of something simple, you know. And many of the time, we don't even know. These parents could be pushing these kids to transition and things of that nature. So, yeah, continue.
To a certain extent, so that they no longer feel the need to change their appearance to conform to the opposite sex's gender stereotypes, or whatever mental health crisis they were going through alleviates. It sometimes, rarely, but sometimes they can dissipate on their own. Or it was a phase and they grow out of it. So, what the NHS really wants is to make sure that they get all that money. And if you have people...
And they don't care that those people might regret it and, actually have a lot of damage because of what they went through, with all the hormones and, transitioning. They really don't care about the well-being of the individual. They really don't, But I think their motive is not just money. I think their motive is just their, the way their structure is made and how their facility is made is to basically naturally do this. So, continue.
Insisting because they have to wait a couple of years to get on their titty skittles or to start growing their T-dicks, then, that money just goes up the water spout. You don't want that. You want to get it all. So this is a scam. Even though it's called a scheme, it is a scam. And it's a damn shame that UK taxpayers are put on the hook for this kind of nonsense. All right, I'm going to leave that here.
Yeah, I definitely see this as, a situation where they're just taking advantage of people, basically, I think, in these situations. And they're not really trying to see if they can help the people. That's my thing. It's like, why don't you ever try and think about how you can help them instead of trying to just change their bodies? You don't actually want to get to the root of their problem. You don't even want to get to the reason why they feel the way they do. Because many of the time they might feel a certain way towards being the sex that they were born, and it might have to do with something that they could have fixed, but instead they looked past it and just threw hormones at them, And I think this is why in many cases, people do transition and they still kill themselves, And you can even see there's like a few people who have actually talked about they're trans, but they still talk about how they fully transitioned and they have bouts of how they want to kill themselves and stuff. And that tells you that obviously everything that they didn't even help them after all of that. So I really like this video. It's a really cool video. I like her perspective on the trans community. I mean, some things she does have a different view on that I might not agree with her on, but you have to understand with me, when I follow people with their content, I don't follow them to agree with them on everything. I actually follow them because I agree on enough things to subscribe to them, basically. So, yeah, great video. Very insightful. So that's all I have to really say. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe and comment down below. Bye, guys.